Hello and welcome everyone to the Marketing and Market Research Tableau user group. Today we've got a interesting agenda. I can juggle around here. Do a quick intro to our leadership team, as we do for anyone who might be new here. We've got a few announcements. We'll then ask if anyone wants to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about you and why you're here. And then we'll get into our featured presentation today. We have Hara here, and he's going to talk about his experience and working with survey data. And then we'll have some networking and a swag giveaway. So make sure you stick around to the end. I'm Josh Wilson. Started the market research Tableau user group a couple of years ago. And then we've added a few more leaders along the way, and also broadened to become the marketing and market research Tableau user group. I'm an independent consultant. I do market research analytics, so a lot of analyzing and visualizing survey data, of course, with Tableau, and also some more advanced techniques doing segmentation and choice modeling and pricing analysis and fun stuff like that. I don't think Sharon is here today, or Vinod. We have Sarah, if you want to introduce yourself.
Perfect. Thanks, Josh. Good morning. My name is Sarah Pallett. I'm a Tableau consultant. I work on freelance projects. My first career was in advertising and marketing, so that's my background. And I'm also a Tableau ambassador. I love sharing knowledge about Tableau and connecting individuals in the community. So thanks for joining us today, and would love to connect. I'll hand it over to Luigi.
Hi, everybody. I'm Luigi Ciccieri. I'm Vice President Operations at Direct Avenue. We're a performance marketing media buy agency. So anything that's on TV or connected TV, we buy the advertising and do all the analysis and report on profitability. And I love doing that and sharing my knowledge. I'm also a Tableau ambassador as well, and love talking about how wonderful Tableau is and how to use it, and meeting a bunch of people, and excited to be here with you all today.
Cool. Moving on to some announcements. Sarah's going to take us through a few happenings in the Tableau world.
Perfect. Thanks, Josh. So yeah, there's some new things happening that we wanted to make you aware of. Tableau has launched a new Tableau community Slack channel. And if you scan this QR code, you can go ahead and join. It's open to all in the data fam. And it's a really great place to connect with other individuals, stay up to date on new info about Tableau, and then also learn about upcoming events. There's lots of channels within it. In particular, if you participate in any of the community projects, such as Back to Basics, there's a channel dedicated just to that within this Slack community. So highly recommend joining there. And then on the next slide, we've got information regarding where you can share your ideas or suggestions to make Tableau better. So this idea exchange is found on the Salesforce website, and they're always looking for customer feedback, suggestions, ideas. So be sure to check out the idea exchange. And then last but not least, I just wanted to give a shout out to Tableau user groups. If you scan this QR code, it'll take you to the homepage. There's a few in particular that I wanted to highlight. On the next slide, you'll see the DataFam Discovery Tableau user group. And this is a newer one that they've announced. Josh, if you could forward it to the next slide. It'll show everyone, there's a QR code there, as well as the website address. This user group holds monthly meetings or monthly calls, virtual calls with Tableau product managers. So you can hear directly from them what about all the latest features. And so I highly recommend joining this one and then tuning in for some of those monthly calls. And then on the next slide, one other Tableau user group that I wanted to highlight is the DataFam Career Makers tag. They hold calls every other week. I believe it's on Wednesdays. And this is just a really great group for networking, any career advice that you may need. It's led by a few Tableau community leaders. I think there's 5 or 6 of them, and they rotate hosting the calls. And so it's a really great resource for anybody that's looking to network within the Tableau community. So that's what's hot and new with Tableau. So definitely check out those links and join an upcoming call.
Very cool. And I realized we didn't have our Slack in here just now, so we'll drop a link in the chat as well. We have a Slack channel as well.
Yeah.
If you have any questions or just want to connect with us, you can join. We'll drop that in the chat. Next up, so we like to meet a few community members at each of our meetings, just to help to get to know everybody. So if you're feeling up to it, you can just come off of mute and we'll ask you, what's your name, who do you work for, your role, your experience with Tableau and with marketing and or market research. And, if there's anything that you want to share that you excel at with data visualization and any areas that you might struggle with as well, because that might give us ideas for future events. So if anyone wants to introduce yourself, feel free to jump in.
Hey, Josh. Hey, everyone. My name is Ryan Corser. I work for Vanderbilt University. I'm in higher education. I specialize in surveys that we conduct on campus for faculty, staff, and students. I came to Vanderbilt as a marketing postdoc, and I sort of turned that into a staff position at Vanderbilt. And occasionally I do some marketing-esque surveys here at Vanderbilt. We did sort of a pricing study with parking a few years ago, hearkening to Josh's expertise there. And in terms of what areas maybe I struggle with Tableau is getting a template maybe going where I can sort of easily transfer things from one survey to the next. I guess I spend a lot of time, from each project, you build sort of custom builds, and that it's fun, but it's also takes a lot of time to do that.
Yep, I think many of us here can feel your pain in that. There's templates are great if you can do it, but it's like every platform is different, and then every survey you got different types of questions, and you got to pick all the same boxes when you're exporting the data, to make sure it comes out the exact same way. And so, yeah, feel your pain.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think the more time I spend in Tableau, the faster I can on each build, and it's getting better each too.
Yeah. Thanks, Ryan. Anyone else?
So I can introduce myself, I guess. Hi, my name's Renata. I work for a credit union. Technically a data analyst, but I'm new to the whole thing. I've had a heavy retail background. I joined our member experience department. They gave me access to Tableau, and I went, oh, this is fun. And I started building all this stuff, and then the data analytics team just kind of scooped me up. So I've been doing this for about a year now. And I am in charge of a lot of our member and prospect surveys. So I was really looking forward to this session, honestly.
Awesome. Great. Yeah. Welcome. Glad to have someone new as well. Anyone else? All right. Well, let's move on to our feature presentation. We have Nick Hara here today, and I will turn it over to him to tell you about his background and take us through his presentation. Welcome, Nick.
Awesome. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Josh, do you mind letting me share the screen? The thingy is not letting me now. Great. Hey, everyone. I've got a whole slide on my little intro, but I'll just do it right now while we're waiting for everything to get running on my computer. Just a little bit of background on me. I'm Nick Hara, pronouns he, him. I've been working with Tableau for since 2013, so over a decade now. I actually started at Tableau in their technical support department, which was really interesting because I spent a lot of time working on very minute sort of problems with the product at the time, and helping people get there to their desired end result. I actually then moved on to being an analyst within Tableau for the technical support department. I was their second analyst. And then I actually moved over to New York, where I became a pre-sales sales engineer, worked a lot with enterprise businesses, marketing firms, doing all sorts of really, really interesting stuff, eventually working with the United Nations. And their various organizations. I'm happy to talk a little bit about that. A lot less survey data in what they were doing, a lot more humanitarian data. And then I spent 4 years working for a political campaign where it's all about opinions and research. So we were trying to figure out how to mobilize volunteers, how to understand what people within the district thought about certain issues, and monitored social media. So a lot of that fun stuff. Um, just a little bit about me. I've got 2 young daughters, love fly fishing, and am always big on a board game. So if you want to talk or chat about any of that, please feel free to reach out after this this meeting here. So today's purpose is to hopefully talk about and generate discussion on how to work best with survey data. As you'll hear from me probably over and over in this presentation, one of the biggest challenges I see is that survey data is perhaps one of the most common first types of data that people will want to analyze. And it's also one of the most challenging. So I want to give us an overview of sort of how I approach survey data, but I don't want it to be seen as orthodoxy. That said, if you're paying attention, I've made a couple of questions at the end that that I think Josh will be asking the group about my presentation. That that will hopefully get you some swag if you answer it right. Uh, Survey data is so varied. Even though I use the word should or do this, there I want to encourage us to step out of that orthodoxy a little bit. So just as a general overview of what I'd like to go over today, we're going to talk about the process of writing a survey, mostly about how if you are involved in the process of designing the survey, it can really reduce that headache later on when you're going to analysis. Part 2 is where where my experience has generally been, which is we get the survey data in whatever state it's in, and we're going to have to prepare it. So I want to talk a little bit about that. And then the third major part is just the analysis. What does analysis look like? What can we do? What can't we do? We'll spend a little bit of time on Q&A. And then if we have time, but not required, would love to play with a little bit of the data that I've got so we can take a look at it. and just sort of see what that looks like. But again, nothing too fancy there. The big thing I want to encourage with everyone is, I know I can kind of talk fast. Please let me know if you've got a question. Feel free to hop in with something. Just so you know, I can't see the chat right now. I'm just presenting my screen. So, unmute and just throw your hand up. Happy to pause, go back on something. If you disagree with something, I also really want to generate discussion here. Again, surveys are really varied, and your particular use case may be quite different. All right, so I want to say it up front, say it again, say it many times. Survey data is hard, and again, I think it's because it's one of the first types of data that most folks encounter, at least in my experience. It's seemingly quite easy, right? What do people think about this? The questions are very straightforward, especially when you make survey forms. It feels like, okay, I just click those buttons, put my name in, sent it off, and we should be able to take, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of those data points and easily say. The reality tends to be much more difficult in my experience, and there's a variety of reasons for that. So let's talk about writing a survey and how we can kind of head off some of those difficulties at the pass. So it's not so easy sometimes to analyze certain types of surveys. And these are the ones that require a lot of reshaping, ones in which the survey was designed kind of with this a broad idea in mind. It's not very narrow. So the audience of who is going to fill it out, who is going to consume the analysis from it, is a little bit more vague, and folks struggle to clearly define that. Similarly, if the goals are undefined, the questions tend to elicit a lot of varied responses. I wrote down these next two, multi-selects and free response. It doesn't mean they're bad. I just want to like really emphasize this is multi-selects are not bad, free response is not bad. It does mean that we as analysts tend to have more work to do to explain what those things mean. And so the last two customers I've had just interestingly have asked me to work on survey data. And they both had a lot of free response text and a lot of multi-select. And so we're going to take a look a bit at what that is, and I'll sort of show you a little bit on those challenges. But in a very simple way for multi-select, the major challenge is, all right, if people selected 2 or 3 options out of, let's say, 10, the number of responses may be different. So some folks may select 1, some may select up to 5 responses. How do you weight that? What's valuable tends to not have a priority order. And so when you as an analyst say X people thought this, well, 20% of them answered 5 or 6 things, and 30% of them answered 1 or 2 things, and so they thought it was the top 2 most important. And it gets more and more nuanced, so it can be very difficult to sometimes convey that. More on the reshaping side of things, it can get also a little messy. So we'll talk a little more about that, but just really keep that in mind. With free responses, those can be very great for getting qualitative information, but when you have to go back and code them and then visualize that information, it can get a little bit messy, especially in Tableau. Things that are not so easy are if you've got a lot of missing responses or incomplete forms. So as always, when we're thinking about building a survey, how are we going to get 100% completion on people who fill out the form or start the form? Because the second we start getting missing data, it's a big question of what's there. And just a minor note on statistical rigor. I'm not going to really cover that today. but knowing which tests to run is important if you do need that statistical rigor. So things like margin of error, et cetera, et cetera. Just be aware of those things if you're going into that. It is easier when you have minimal reshaping to do. That means fewer multi-selects, less coding to be done. When you've got a well-defined scope for your audience, your goals, how this data is going to ultimately be applied, and you've got very narrow defined questions that you want answered. And I'm not just talking about the questions on the survey itself, but the research questions, the broader ones. And then the final note is about clear responses, making sure that A and B don't overlap. And so each response is distinctive. So let's talk about multi-selects very briefly. I know I've already kind of touched on this. I personally think that you can more or less eliminate multi-selects. So if you say, hey, what's your fruit preference? I often will go with a grid selection or like a 5-star rating on a list of things. So this is from a Google form. We can take a look at another at that same form later if we have time, where I say, hey, do you like apples, right? And folks will say yes, bananas, no, right? Or you can say no opinion, right? And leaving them all of those things, or you can do that 5-star grid, whatever it may be. You can also just separate them out into multiple single questions. So if you have that opportunity, it's going to cut the number of rows per respondent down to 1, hopefully, which is going to make that analysis much easier. Briefly want to touch on question bias. I'm going to let you sort of read this, but want to note that question bias is one of those things that is very difficult to eliminate fully, but taking the time to really think through, are we creating a biased response or are we creating an answer that we want to hear, is a really important step. And I've seen this in a lot of different ways, right? Is that if you don't take the time to just, hey, are we getting unbiased, or are we giving folks as unbiased a question as we possibly can, then you end up kind of getting what you already want. And it's great for validating that we're doing the thing we want to be doing already, but it's not so great if things go south, and it could put you in sort of a poor position when you're an analyst. I hate having to personally, and why the numbers are saying things are going great in the survey, and then the reality on the ground is things are not going so great, and that's where question bias can get you in a bit of a pickle. So let's talk about preparing the data. And I know that this is fast. We've got a lot of ground to cover. I'm covering it soups and nuts here. So happy to slow down again and talk about anything. But when it comes to data preparation, one of the things that almost universally happens is the exported or downloaded format of the survey platform that you're using is not immediately usable. This is a download of a CSV from, I believe, Google Forms. And you would think that if you're downloading it as a CSV, it would do it right. But instead, it got 3 different headers and header fields. So this is a step that, typically I say, go into Tableau Prep and do stuff. This is a step that you might just open up Excel or a spreadsheet program and fix the headers yourself. Change the first row to be the only header row. Merge in this case, Q1 with the question text, and probably instead of the full question text, which is usually a legible, human readable sentence, you probably just want to have some sort of abbreviation that you can use in Tableau that'll have the column headers that you understand, and that's where you actually get to this next thing, which is coding your responses, right? You want to, I generally will have a code book of some variety that I can use to refer back to, and as we'll see in a sec, for this particular survey, um, what we did was I actually used that in the reshaping process for Tableau prep. So I have coded responses for, and this is pretty common, is the actual response may be 0, 1, 2, but that may mean no, yes, or unsure, as you can see here in question 3. And so you want to code those back in so that it's human readable. And I may also have a separate sheet for the names of the questions themselves, so we can get that full text. And I may actually just keep that as a separate data source that I put in the workbook later. And all of this is to help facilitate both your understanding and ease of analysis, as well as ultimately your audience's. Briefly on null and missing data, I know I've mentioned it before, but you're going to have some null and missing data. Know how that affects your data. Does it affect the number of responses that are on a certain question? Is the number of responses on a question significantly less than the number of folks that responded to the survey itself? Does that mean that you need to maybe remove that question or have a big asterisk on what those percentages for the answers mean? How are you going to present null or missing data? And just what are you going to do with it? So those are just areas that you really should be considering. And there's no single answer, right? Sometimes you miss like 3 or 4 responses. It's not a big deal. Sometimes, as in one of the questions that I was looking at, nearly half of respondents, survey respondents, didn't answer the question. And so it makes a big difference in what we mean when we say 50% of people thought X for this question. This is where I get into a little bit of my personal approach and what I do for the prep stage is I will separate out questions by type so that I can manage them separately. And the beauty of Tableau and its data model is that I can put all those back together in Tableau Desktop without worrying too much about what how many data sources I'm proliferating. So at its most basic, I separate out the multi-selects from the free response questions and the single answer questions. The single answer questions tend to be about the easiest to work with. In this case, you'll notice that there's a little bit more work that I did on those, mostly because I added the code book back in and the values and replaced those values. But for the most part, single answers are pretty straightforward, and you can just output the file that you want. In other situations, with the multi-selects, I end up doing way more because in this format, and again, survey formats vary by type. In the we received this survey, multi-selects were comma separated as a single field. So it would say, header is question 1. And then the responses were the number of selections that people made. So it would be like 4, comma 6, comma 7 for the number of those. So I would have to split those out, do some pivoting, a lot of work there. And then you output that data. And this is all of the multi-selects as separate individual data sources. This is where I'm like really stepping away from, I think, if you go search online for how Tableau years and years ago wrote a blog post about working with survey data. They said pivot all of it down into a single column. I say separate each one out into a separate data source. And the reason for that is multi-selects with the number of responses that you get, as well as the null and missing data problem, is you're going to get a different number of respondents and a different number for the total. And so each one being a separate data source that you just merge back into the data model in Tableau makes this a little bit easier to work with in the long run. And the reason that I'm doing this, all of this, is so that I can work across questions. So big asterisk here is that if you only want to see, one slice of your data and analyze one question at a time with maybe a few filters on, say, demographic information, right? What's their age? What's their race? Gender, sex? Then you can probably disregard this a bit. But if you want to say how many people thought X and thought Y and thought Z, then you're talking about really triangulating on multiple questions, and that's why I've built this. After all of that, after you've put it all out, you've got your analysis. And so here's your most basic analysis, right? This is where I want to emphasize bar charts are your friends. There's so many great ways of presenting data, especially survey data, and some really engaging ones. I'll show you a couple of examples, but the thing I've come to over and over and over again is bar charts. You almost universally come back to how many respondents thought X for a single question, and you can get these answers. Really simplify it when it comes down to a dashboard, put up your filters for, again, demographics, and you've really minimized also your cross-question analysis. That's pretty basic, that's pretty common. What I find funny is almost every single dashboard that's provided by survey companies is filled with pie charts, which I'm not going to spend too much time dwelling on the difficulty of analyzing slices with pie charts. Just to note simply that pie charts are often an inadequate visualization choice, especially when you've got more than 4 choices in a question. Let's take a look at advanced analysis, some fun things that I've done. So here is one looking across questions, and this is why I had all of those different data sources. It also allows you to compare answers within a multi-select question. So thought, people who selected A and B and C, and how many people selected 5 options, 4 options, 3 options, right? And you start to get into the nuance of respondents versus the number of responses. And so we start to get that more nuanced look. This one is specifically asking if you've heard about a program, and you can see the number of folks that said yes. They also were pushed through to additional sub-questions in this survey, and access questions about access. So you said you've heard of this program. Do you know how to access the program? And then have you ever used the program, and getting into the sub there and there and there. And this was really great because I used actually Ken Flerlage's Sankey templates to help me build that. And this saved me a lot of time, just generally shouting out the beauty of some of the templates that are online and available from the community. I want to provide a big caution on this, which is that the more advanced your analysis, the more fun it can be like this, but also the more difficult it may be to explain, especially to lay audiences. So the thought that I have here is, I understand it, but I usually will, unfortunately, I use my wife as a guinea pig usually, and I'm like, hey, what do you see here? What does this mean? And so just getting somebody who's not really immersed in that world to take a look and see if they understand it can be very, very helpful in knowing if you should continue to pursue this kind of visualization and analysis. Otherwise, you might just go back to the bar chart. Like I said, bar charts are your friend. It also offers the ability for us to do some really beautiful presentations. Josh will probably recognize the one on the left. This is looking at the top 3 places and things that people feel are important for them to live in or near. The live visualization allows you to select A, B, and C, and you can sort of see how respondents felt about these things. I personally think it looks really cool, but also, as I mentioned, it can be very hard to understand. And so there's going to be a real balance in that. The screenshot that you see on your right is survey data from the Big Book of Dashboards. So if you've ever read Steve Wexler, Jeffrey Schaefer, and Andy Cockreeve's book, Big Book of Dashboards, it's got some excellent examples of different types of dashboards that you can use for different types of data. They look at not so great versions, and then they go and they rebuild them into versions they really like. This one I wanted to call out specifically for the qualitative aspect of those 5-star ratings that we talked a little bit about. Often survey data is asking, rank from 0 to 10 or 0 to 5 or whatever scale you want, how you feel about X, Y, or Z thing. And then what they did here was, instead of just a single stacked bar chart that always starts at 0, they actually split it on negative versus positive sentiment, and then centered the neutral responses. That creates this scale where you can see that, for example, product D is more popular overall, and has far less neutral opinion. And so it really, that floating Gantt chart, stacked Gantt chart, does a really good job of giving us a sense of what's working and what's not, while also showing us those means there. I really like this as an example of working with sentiment survey. Obviously, like I said, there's so many ways of gathering survey data and visualizing it, and we just don't have time today. But I do recommend taking a look at the Big Book of Dashboards. There's a couple of survey data dashboards in there. Big caution to think about is personally identifiable information, PII. If you are working with that, have a plan to anonymize your data, either through aggregation or changing anything that might be identifiable about it. There have been some techniques that folks have used where seemingly public data can be used to, or non-identifiable data can be used to identify individual respondents. It's not always a problem, especially if depending on the line of work that you have, but it's just a caution to think about as you're working with, any data about people. And then the final thought is about statistical rigor and tests. Again, I'm not a statistician. I only have to do minimal tests on those things, but know if that is something that you have to worry about or think about. It's worth going back and refreshing yourself on why and when to use those elements. All right, quick review, and then we'll get to Q&A. So we talked a little bit about how to write a survey if you, again, get involved in that process, which, if you do have that opportunity to throw your hand up and say, hey, it sounds like you guys are writing a survey, can I just give you my 2 cents? I think it's very helpful, saves you a lot of time later on. Basically, just plan for analysis, limit your free responses and multi-selects, or limit how they would be used. Free responses can be very useful for giving you additional information about a previous question, but if they are solely themselves something that may need to be coded later, it might be worth it to turn those into multi-selects. or not multi, into questions themselves, where you give people the option. Think carefully about what you are and are not collecting your data for, especially how that data analysis will be used. So a misapplication of survey data could really get you in hot water. Then we talked a little bit about preparing data, headers and codebooks, cleaning those up and getting a codebook ready so that you personally, at a bare minimum, feel very comfortable with the data that you're looking at can really save you, again, a lot of time. And I think my big thing is don't be afraid to work with multiple data sources. I know that that seems a little daunting. Oh, I meant to show you all, if we have time, I'll show you how that data model looks when you actually go and put it in Tableau Desktop. And on the analysis part, charts are your friend. And simple filters can do a lot to really help your users both feel more in charge of their analysis, as well as you to understand subsets of your respondents. All of it is to say that, flexible cross question analysis, that more advanced analysis, can be really good, really helpful, especially in the exploration phase. But it wouldn't surprise me if you actually end up going back to those simple bar charts, especially if your audience is not as technical as you are. And so yeah, and now just wanted to open it up for Q&A, and see what kind of discussion we can generate. And then these are links to my various profiles. Feel free to reach out.
Thank you, Nick. There was one question that came in, and I would be interested to see what you have in Tableau. By the way,
I kind of skipped the Tableau desktop portion. So here's some of that.
Yeah. You have it. Okay, perfect. While you have that, I'll ask this question that came through the chat. Where can we get this type of survey data set for practice?
Oh, yes.
Any link or reference?
Yeah. So first of all, here is the mess of the data source that, and this is a great example of when you don't have the ability to do input on what the survey is going to look like. This is what you might end up with, and that's fine. In this case, I really didn't know what the data was going to tell us, which is why I separated out every single multi-select here and connected them to the single answer questions. I've got response, some metadata related to it. I also did this one, not as necessary for all of you folks, but if I wanted to do more Sankey visualizations, I wanted to do some data densification, and so it's good to have that connected. After the fact, the survey team went back and figured out where they took the surveys, and so that ended up being a totally separate data source. And then, because this was against a subset of a population, I live in Portland. I looked at the Portland metro population as a comparison for one of the visualizations. So you can see how extensive this can be. And then for a couple of surveys that you cannot, I meant to put these links in but I actually have two versions of the survey. A survey optimized for analysis. So this is what we talked a little bit about, where everything is a single selection. And I've got this form. I will send this link out afterwards. And then I've got that's maybe not so optimized for that, where you've got just about every type of question in here, and then you can do these multi-selects, and you can get a sense of how, when you see the data, I'll also make sure you have access to the data, how that can create this proliferation of the question of like, what is a row? What is a response? And that can cause issues.
couple other questions came in. Have you used
Yeah.
external tools like Python to help preparing with the data to avoid additional outputs?
Yes and no. I try to avoid that for my customers mostly. The survey that we were actually just looking at, some of that coding happened in Python. So the decoding and then the codebook work was actually done by a grad student whose primary tool was Python. I find that, you know, you're going to end up doing some data prep on survey data no matter what. Even the most optimized survey, optimized being a very squishy word here, you're going to still end up doing some data prep, and whatever you're most comfortable doing that data prep in is what I would recommend. For me, it's mostly just working straight in the CSV file in a spreadsheet tool and primarily working in Tableau prep.
Yep, makes sense. 2 questions here from Bradley. 1, what is a code book? And 2, what is data identification?
Yes, you know what? Let me see if I can actually just pull up the code book real quick. Let me go back to the. I'll go back here to that slide so you can sort of see while I'm pulling it up what I'm talking about. So codebook can be a variety of things. Usually it's a spreadsheet where you've got a list of, say, the questions. A list of the questions as well as the values associated with them. So question 1 had 2 possible responses, either you consented or didn't consent. And question 3, for example, had 3 types of responses, but they were all coded in the raw data in the CSV that I was given as 0, 1, or 2. And they actually had responses related to them, right? No, yes, or unsure, right? And so I had to kind of decode that so that when I go and I made the visualization itself, and we can see an example over here, it says yes, no, unsure, right? Which is much more valuable to us and human readable to my audience, right? Instead of saying 2, 0, 1.
Yep. And
does that answer the question?
I think so. So codebook is like data mapping spreadsheet. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm in spreadsheet form, but I also want to note that the grad student I worked with, he also made a document that was in plain text, and then I just converted that to a spreadsheet so I could use it in my prep flow.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then data densification.
Yep.
Do you want to briefly?
Data.
I'm sure we can go into a rabbit hole, but maybe we keep it high level.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it really high level, which is just I talked a little bit about null and missing data. If you want to say build those fun swoopy lines in Tableau, so these swoopy lines, you have to plot each one out individually. And so the way to do that is through data densification, where you just have a value for everything from 0 to, let's say, 100, right? And then you do some fun calculations to tell Tableau, hey, when it's at 0, it's actually at, it's also at position 3 on the Y scale. And then when it's at 100, it's at position 0, right? So it just does this fun swoopy line using some great math. Densification is useful for getting to some visualization types that aren't, well, it's not natively available in Tableau.
Yep, makes sense. We have lots of questions. This is
I
great.
love it. I love questions. I'm also open to any disagreements with what I said.
Where did I leave off here? Okay, here's a potential, at least introduction to some difference of opinion. Okay, Haim says, there's a bit of a divide in the survey world regarding the use of NPS. What's your opinion of NPS, and what's your alternative?
Candidly, I haven't worked with Net Promoter Score since 2016, so I don't have a strong opinion on it. I know that that's kind of copping out. I just don't have an opinion because I haven't had to work with it in a while. I think with all metrics, the one thing that I'll caution is, don't focus too much on a single metric, because it's going to get you in hot water when other indicators are telling you different things. And then I guess the final note, from what I recall, is think about question bias big time. I was working on Tableau's technical support quality responses back in the day, and the question was very biased toward how the technical support person performed, and generally speaking, they did really, really well. Where we had problems was with the process itself. People did not like waiting as long as they had to wait. If you've opened a support case with Tableau lately, still have to wait a lot. And none of our questions got at that problem.
Yeah, I can see how that would be tricky to separate those concepts.
Yep.
I'll say one thing on NPS. Yeah, it can definitely be problematic, but it's really sort of entrenched. So I feel like if you're in survey data, you're going to come across that at one point or another. The challenge, I think, is that it can be like context dependent, and you don't necessarily know why. So you always want to ask like the follow-up question, which is open-ended, to say like, why did you pick that score? But sometimes people so the NPS is for those who don't know, it's would you recommend this product or service to a friend or a colleague? And there's lots of reasons why somebody might not recommend it. Maybe they don't think that people would. It's just not for them. Like they wouldn't be interested in that whole, whatever product. Like they're just not in that field. So why would I recommend something to them that they would have no use for? Not because of the product itself, but because they just, So anyway, there's definitely a lot of conflict around NPS specifically. So there's a couple more questions here. I only scheduled this for an hour today, honestly, because we just had one presenter. Usually we have two, and we scheduled for an hour and a half. So I don't know if anyone has to leave, or Nick, if do you have time to stick around at all?
I can stay a little longer. Yeah, I've got. I'm happy to stick around for another 15, up to another 15.
Okay, great. Well, since we told everyone that it would be an hour, and we also said that if you stick around to the end, there would be swag giveaway. Why don't we do that now?
Do you want me to stop sharing?
No, that's okay.
All right.
Just to speed this along, and I'll just ask the question. So, all right. So we're gonna ask a question here, and the first person to get it at will get a swag. So the first question: which type of survey question causes the most difficulty during analysis? Which type of survey question causes the most difficulty during analysis? Got some. Oh wow, responses coming in. We did. Nick did mention a couple, but what do you think, Nick? I mean, the answer you gave me was the select all that apply.
And I'll be happy to explain other responses and why I think this one.
So Ryan got the answer. Open text are difficult as well. I would agree.
Yeah. And I would expect that, you know, there's a lot of different question types that can be very difficult, but I think that multi-select by far is the most difficult for a few reasons. Biggest one, or a couple of them being like, hey, different survey platforms will format multi-selects differently, as well as the problem of decoupling a single respondent from the number of responses that you're suddenly getting. And it causes a lot of issues with how you're going to ultimately present that data.
Mm-hmm. I agree. All right, second question for our swag giveaway. When working with survey data, when in doubt, which type of chart should you default to? Which type of chart should you default to? Yes, this was a little bit easier. We have people quick on the keys. Well, we got Renata came in as the first respondent. So congrats to Renata and to Ryan for our swag giveaway winners. I don't think we have to explain that one as much, hopefully.
No, I think I said it pretty explicitly.
Yeah. I think we're all a fan of bar charts here. I mean,
yeah.
Come on. Okay. Great. So we got those. We'll get you guys your info and your swag. Sarah, we'll follow up with you on that. Sarah, do you need them to?
If you could send me your email address, please, Ryan and Renata, then I'll get your Tableau store gift card sent over to you.
Awesome. Cool. All right, let's check back up at the other questions we had here. So Ryan asked, could you show us the prep flow in more detail, how the joins are connected?
Yeah.
Maybe Ryan, if you have anything more specific that you want to see, feel free to jump in.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I was particularly interested in how you connect the sort of question mapping ID or like the question or like the metadata with the survey responses, maybe.
Yeah. So here I've got and there's a lot of stuff that I did. I probably could have done this a lot better. I was also moving kind of quickly, so I just want to like make that big sort of analysis or a note here. But what happened is I separate out the questions. In particular, I'm looking at single answer questions and what they're doing here, just the single answer. So just select one. And then I pivoted all of those down into one giant column. And then I grabbed that code book, which you saw that snippet before, where each question is coded along with their numeric value that isn't very human readable, along with the column that does have the human readable value. I joined those together right here. So everything's now joined. Q1 has these values and everything gets linked up. And then we're going to go and we're going to unpivot it back into their questions, fill it all in, and make it so that now every question has the human readable values associated with it. Again, I think this probably could be simplified a little bit, but it's the way that I think about it in a step-by-step sort of manner, and it just helps me. The final result is that when you come here, and hopefully it doesn't redo the extract. Yeah, it's going to redo. Of course it is. Okay, well, here we go. We'll just go back this way. No, go back. I didn't do anything, please. There we go. Here, and you've got, question. Oh, whoops. That's only got one response. You can pick one, like, that's a good one. Oh yeah, question 9. What's the importance of internet? Folks would do that, and then you say. Also, if you're working with survey data, I strongly recommend doing this. This is going to save you so much time. is you now have all of the responses that are, again, human readable. How important is internet for you? Most folks say very important. Having it, actually, this is already sorted by its value. So, and then maybe you'd want to do that net promoter score style, but I'd have to figure out the length problem. So going back here, let's just leave it at the bar. You've now got these so that they're human readable instead of 0, 1, 2, 3, which doesn't mean anything to anybody.
Did you mention you also import the question text, like the stem
Yes.
of the question?
Yeah.
somewhere
So that's here in this code book, and so if you go back here, you can see what it looks like, which it's just we've already seen a screenshot of it in that in my presentation, but it says, hey, here's what the question is called. It's got all of them, and then here's what the values were for those questions. So the it could be 0, 1, 2, and then here's what they actually meant. And that's what all of that joining and work is that I just put it back in with the questions themselves, so that I don't worry about when I'm doing analysis, what did 0 mean? What did 1 mean, right? I know it means people thought internet was very important.
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Yep.
All right, let's see. We have question. Do you use any sort of version control for the code book? For example, new survey has 5 questions, and question 3 is now 7. 5 new. So I guess I suppose if you maybe you would do that if you had like a new version of the survey, I would say. But what do you think?
Yeah, I haven't had to deal with that too much, but I would definitely be managing that. I think the biggest challenge I find is getting my stakeholders or my clients to do the work of telling me this question that was question 4 is now question 5, right? And making sure that actually happens. So the biggest thing is making sure that as those surveys change, obviously you need to have a process, but your biggest challenge is almost universally making sure your client or whoever you're working with is being very clear about what those changes are, so that you can document them effectively.
Yeah, for sure. I have a question.
Yeah.
What's the most complex or challenging survey data that you've worked with?
I think we're kind of looking at it. It's not that it has a lot of responses, but it's that there was a lot of free text responses that needed to be hand coded. That's what that grad student we were working with was doing. He was doing a lot of hand coding, and then even then there was a lot of qualitative issue with it. Not his fault, but just it's part of a larger process. And so this had all those multi-selects. It's had a ton of free responses, and some of this information, some of the questions are really sensitive in terms of how people respond to the questions, what they mean by it, and so the process around it has been similarly complex, because we're working with this data is actually a survey of homeless individuals and what their housing preferences are, how they would like to interact with various services to get them back on their feet, things like that. And so we actually ran several community analysis groups where we actually go back and show them some of these results. Hey, this is what we're thinking. This is what we understand from our analysis. Does this tell us, right? So it's a process of that bigger conversation. I would say the most survey is by far the one that has a lot of process around it and less almost the data itself.
Yeah, that's a good point. I liked I liked how you kind of approach this a little more holistically than just sort of diving into the data and okay, this is how you analyze and visualize. But yeah, I like especially getting in upfront and understanding what's going on and looking at the questionnaire and yeah, the more that I found that I can be involved in that in the upfront process, and then that informs how I'm going to analyze and visualize it later. All right. Well, maybe a rapid fire. Are you using AI at all?
No, I don't. Maybe I will in the future, but not now.
And do you have Tableau Public and any of that? So my personal interest is like the Sankey stuff that you're doing, because I think that's pretty interesting, as you know.
Yeah.
If you have that, if it's shareable anywhere.
Yeah. It's right here. It's my profile is first Hara, FIRST, and Hara, my last name, HARA. And you should be able to find me. This stuff is not up yet, so you guys are all getting a preview of it. The hope is to have a really cool review of this survey data and make it a part of a larger series of reports.
Awesome. All right. Well, don't want to keep everyone. I know, Nick, you said you had 15 minutes, so we'll get everybody out of here. I just dropped in our Slack for our market research or marketing and market research Tableau user group Slack, if anyone wants to join. And thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Thanks, Nick, for presenting. I think this might be the most questions that we've ever had.
Good.
So yeah, I appreciate
Definitely.
everyone's involvement, and yeah, this was great. So thanks all, and have a great rest of your day, rest of your week, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Thanks for hosting, Josh.
Awesome.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you.